With high estrogen, my libido is pretty high, right? It is, I definitely have a lot of sex drive. To me, like any time of the day, I'm ready to go. But if I don't have enough androgens to offset that, and again, there's a threshold, it's like above 55 picograms per milliliter for me. Even if I have 4,000 nanograms per deciliter total testosterone and sky high DHT, I still, in that case and in most other cases with high estrogen, just have like accordion. It just feels extra watery, as you would imagine an estrogenic state is. Soft, fluffy, good degree of girth, right? But there's really no rigidity. With low estrogen, I will have working erectile function, but my libido will have completely left my body. And with crashed estrogen, nothing works. Full-blown ED, full-blown loss of libido. It's like the libido in my brain in response to anything that might otherwise turn me on has completely gone away. Completely. I mean, it's just dead. Sweet spot estrogen, sweet spot androgens, raging libido, raging erections, teenage style sexual function. But I want to break this down further to get into some of the nuances of how I feel with high estrogen versus low estrogen. But I'm going to do it through first watching Derek's video on this topic specifically. This is a video that everybody on TRT needs to study so that you understand the signs of high estrogen versus low estrogen. And then I want to have a discussion about androgen ratio relative to estrogen, peaking that ratio and widening that ratio and peaking androgens to have the best libido of your life on TRT. I want to break that down. And we're going to listen to what Derek says about his experience with high estrogen versus low estrogen. Let's get into this.
Right when I started this letrozole and started crushing my estrogen into the ground, all of a sudden my interest in women just completely fell off the map. What's up guys, Derek from PLAYBOOK.com. Today we're going to be talking about low estrogen versus high estrogen. First of all, diagnosing yourself without blood work is not something I recommend. In fact, I advise very strongly against it. But some people are not going to get blood work no matter what, and they haphazardly use aromatase inhibitors, and without knowing where if they're high or low, they'll, throw a Arimidex at themselves until they're at, single digit estrogen levels, and then experience, like worse erectile dysfunction, then think, oh, my estrogen must be high. So then they use more Arimidex.
Okay, so let's talk about that quick for a second. You do not want to solely go on your symptoms to determine whether or not you have high or low estrogen, because many protocols can convolute that, and you can think just because you have erectile dysfunction that it's high estrogen, or you can think that just because you've got libido reduction that it's low estrogen. Everybody over time does need to get familiar with what high estrogen and low estrogen on TRT feels like, but you should always back it up, especially as you're learning yourself with bloods, to confirm your suspicion on whether you're high or whether you're low.
It's just like it's like a vicious circle. So anyways, I wanted to make this video to sort of at least give a framework of how I feel personally with high or low estrogen. So like I've literally manually crushed it into the ground with letrozole to dry out for a show way back in the day. And I know how everything feels when I'm high, when I'm normal, when I'm low. Anyways, as far as how I feel when I have high estrogen, for me, if my androgen levels are sufficient, which they almost always are because I can manually adjust them with exogenous HRT, unless I'm doing some weird experiment with like injectable SARMs or something, which I'm not going to be doing anymore. But anyways, my libido is fine. The problem is erectile dysfunction. And it's very obvious when you're like trying to get hard, it's like very hard to stay hard. And this is even with PDE5 inhibitors. If your estrogen is way too high, you'll know this if you've taken a cycle before and you've used way too much test, or you've used, test with D-bol, or, anything that could exacerbate aromatization potentially, or you just have a mismanaged balance of your hormone profile. Having a high estrogen level, even when you have high androgens, if your estrogen is way too high, you end up in a position where your libido is good, but your dick just doesn't work.
Okay, case in point. I mean, I've been trying to scream this from the rooftops to people so that folks don't take the pro-estrogen camp's word and apply it to their protocol as if the androgen-estrogen ratio scales. In other words, what they try to contend to you is that, listen, as long as you have enough androgens to offset that estradiol, you won't have erectile dysfunction or any problem. But I mean, we're hearing this not just from me, but one of the most authoritative authoritative from the mouths of one of the most authoritative people in our space, that no matter how high the androgens are, there's just going to be a threshold at which estrogen inhibits erectile quality, gives you ED. And I've broken down a lot of those mechanisms. Estrogen is prolactogenic. Estrogen increases anti-erectile chemicals like norepinephrine, and that at the penile level actually stops erections from happening. Hyperestrogenism associated with erectile dysfunction and various different studies. Too high estrogen relative to androgens interferes with the cholinergic mediation of nitric oxide firing in your penis, right? It's going to give you erectile dysfunction. So although it does scale up to some extent, you've got a bolus of androgens that goes in. If estrogen is relatively controlled at the moment of that bolus, you're going to have some pretty great libido. If you're frustrated with TRT and need to dial in specifically libido and erections, energy and anabolism, and fix sexual dysfunction, hire me. I am a coach that has been working for 7 years to fix complex sexual dysfunction on TRT, and you can book me in under a minute at livecortex.com or down in the description of this video. Using testosterone cream is the most advanced thing you can do on TRT, and I created a video course showing you specifically how to dial in libido and erections on test cream, and you can get that also down in the description of this video. In fact, a lot of folks find great libido when they do more bolus injections infrequently, and erectile quality should stay good throughout so long as that frequency isn't too tight. In other words, 5-6 days goes by, the estrogen does peak, but then it starts to trough back down, and then you re-inject and you have a great ratio. Super high surging androgens, estrogen relatively okay, controlled not super high, not preventing erection function, and you get in a great balance. But there's a point at which, and I've proven this, clients have come to me and showed me their situations, documented where their hormones are, explained their setups. Remember, I've also been on myself testosterone cycles. So I got to actually see, aside from client work, what the point for me was at which going over an estrogen, no matter how many androgens I have, like again, I was at 4,000 nanograms per deciliter total testosterone at one point, 2,700, 3,700 nanograms per deciliter. It's like if estrogen went over that 55, 60, 65 mark for me into the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, I had ED no matter what. All right. So people really need to take that and understand the suggestions to let estrogen go wherever it naturally falls. It doesn't work past a certain point. It can work to a certain point, but it doesn't scale forever. All right, let's get back to Derek.
Even if you slam a bunch of Viagra and Cialis, it's still not functioning even where it would be normally if you were not in this position. So that is, to me, my number one sign is libido. Like, obviously everyone has their own sign. Some people are going to notice, oh, my blood pressure goes up. Some people are going to say, oh, I get watery, and somehow they can tell just by water retention. For me, the sign is my dick doesn't work, my morning wood is gone, but my libido is high still.
All right, now let's talk about that briefly. Yes, you generally want to have nocturnal erections and morning erections because nocturnal is especially maintenance the function of your penis. There's a period at which automatically you're getting oxygenation and blood flow to the organ, which is going to maintenance it over time. However, there are some individuals on TRT that the only time they get morning wood is when they reduce their libido by estrogen going far too low, and they get automatic erections, because all that's really operating at that point is like a high DHT centered state. So the high DHT, low estrogen state, and by low I mean 15 to 20 picograms per milliliter, there you're going to have raging nocturnals and raging morning wood pretty much every day. That doesn't have to be the case in your TRT protocol. Is it ideal? Absolutely. Right, to maintenance the penis and its function. Is it necessary? No, not every night. Some people are going to have to sit on that borderline where they have enough estrogen to support libido. The nocturnals aren't going out of control, or morning wood isn't going out of control, but they have great erection quality for penetrative sex. So keep that in mind and work to find that balance with TRT over time. You need to dial it on cypionate? Yeah, it's hard, but I've built a video course on that. The only instructional video course that shows you how to dial in test cypionate for sexual function, also down in the description. Now, you could get a little risky with it if you want to experiment and have your cake and eat it too, and have higher levels of androgen so that the libido is consistently high, and still have nocturnals and morning erections, but it's usually done best with infrequent bolus injections of a long-acting ester where you peak dopamine, you peak androgen receptor activation, specifically in the limbic system, and where, because you're dosing infrequently, the estrogen peaks, but then it goes back down. So when it comes time for the next injection, the estrogen is in a relatively cool lower end baseline state. Then you peak everything rises, erections and libido, including nocturnals and morning wood works.
Excuse me. Low estrogen levels as far as figuring out what low estrogen levels feel like, for me, it was really obvious. Like some people, they have, you know, oh, my joints are dry and creaky. Oh, I have this, I have that. For me, oh, for hair is falling out. That's another thing too. One of the things for me that was the biggest red flag is I always look at my dick, to be honest. I don't look at my dick, but I look to my dick to give me signs of if shit's going wrong or not. So if I'm in the sweet spot, I have morning wood, I have no ED, I have no issues whatsoever. And you have, you know, like a healthy sex life in terms of, and you're not like a porn addict or something, you're gonna have morning wood and you're gonna have healthy, good erections with good erection quality, and you're gonna be able to sustain them easily if you have like good sweet spot androgen to estrogen balance in terms of, in general terms, at least from in my experience. And on the high end, if you're estrogen dominant, you end up in a position where it's like really fucking hard to keep an erection. On the low end, when your estrogen is crashed, even if you have high androgen levels or you have normal androgen levels, whatever, if you have rock bottom crashed estrogen, you just don't give a shit about anything, or at least I didn't. I like became completely asexual to the point where I remember very vividly, this was a point in my life where I was sort of like balls deep in bodybuilding, but I was even more balls deep in like pickup, which is like, honestly, part of what was intended to be 50% of my channel was going to be detailing all the things I went through throughout my 19 to 23, where all I did for like 6 days a week pretty much was I would be in the gym eating, or I'd be like picking up girls and going on dates. And I basically went through this phase of my life where that's all that mattered essentially. And I was just trying to rack up a ridiculous lay count, to be completely honest. Every man in their life goes through a period where they need to get laid a lot and kind of justify to themselves that they're, you know, attractive and can get laid with hot girls.
All right, so let's break a couple of these things that Derek said down. So number one, now we're on the low estrogen scale. Absolutely positively, this is in the context of crushing it, which usually you can only do with an aromatase inhibitor, or in some cases, high dose test cream with no real estrogen input like HCG, or like splitting it up and putting some on the shoulders. Some people actually do take 2 high doses of cream. They're far too DHT centric, which has an estrogen blocking effect of the tissues and otherwise. Anyway, so it's almost like taking an AI. But especially taking aromatase inhibitors and dosing them wrong, you crush the estrogen relative to androgens. You can have super high androgens. You could be at 3,000 nanograms per deciliter. If your estrogen is being inhibited at the tissue level via blocking aromatase enzymes, the blood level says you're 5 to 7 picograms per milliliter, you will still, even with all that DHT, have erectile dysfunction. Okay? Estrogen does govern insofar as basically allowing erections to work, erectile quality, so long as it's within a range and not below which, and especially if you're inhibiting it at the tissue level via blocking aromatase with a heavy cancer drug, you're going to lose your erectile quality. You are truly going to lose it. And libido, again, estrogen is critically important for libido insofar as it allows you to notice the androgen-like effect, specifically the AR binding and the hypothalamic awakening and the increases in dopamine synthesis via increases in tyrosine hydroxylase. And the estrogen being, you know, in your relative sweet spot allows for you to feel that and notice that. The erection quality in the gutter when crashed, specifically crashed estrogen. That is the same with me. I have taken Arimidex, Aromasin, both of them, and overshot. In those cases, a guy with a perfectly good sexual function, great rigid erections when dialed in, no previous history of taking hair loss drugs or no necessity for penile rehab or anything wacky like that, I had full-blown erectile dysfunction. This is why, like, looking at blood work and knowing where the estrogen is before you proceed to take an AI, Masteron, Primobolan, even Proviron for some people can be pretty strong at lowering estrogen. You need to know where it is before you crush it. Because if you crush it, I promise you, you are going to be sorry that you crushed your estrogen. Your life's going to suck for quite a while.
I was going on dates like every single day, and I was trying to get laid as much as possible. And I literally went from, I'd have like at the time I had a rotation of 3 girls who I consider like 8 out of 10s, it was like a pretty solid setup I had there. And this was in the sort of like the beginning stages of it. So I was like still really into the shit. And I was going on dates all the time. And right when I started this letrozole and started crushing my estrogen into the ground, all of a sudden my interest in women just completely fell off the map. I just like stopped giving a shit whatsoever. I literally stopped texting the people that I was seeing. I just ghosted them. And this was like an unheard of thing to do when you literally might have spent weeks working on these chicks.
All right, this is another really important point. Not only did the libido crash completely, the erection quality crashed completely, but in this case, this man stopped caring about the women that were in his circle. What this is leading to, and the other real danger of crushing estrogen, especially with stuff that blocks aromatase enzymes, is that you will lose your empathy, your emotional sensitivity to women, to anybody around you, maybe even your cat. Estrogen is very necessary for us to have empathy for other people, for us to feel sensitive about things and to be sensitive to other people's emotions. People often describe me as the anti-estrogen guy. I am not. I am just here to ensure that people understand the correct way to go about having estrogen in whatever range throughout their TRT protocol so that they don't have erectile dysfunction, they don't have libido problems, and then everything functions good. So let's summarize what Derek said. High estrogen relative to androgens, or you cross a certain threshold, 65, 75 picograms per milliliter estradiol, no matter how much androgens you have, libido good, but erectile dysfunction. Sweet spot estrogen relative to androgens, or sweet spot estrogen either way. You know, guys on TRT, 30 is a good sweet spot because you're on TRT dosing. You're not going to super physiologic levels of testosterone like 1500 or above. You might be at 1000 or so, but 30 is great there. You know, 35, maybe push 40, but that's usually above that is problematic. If you're at 1700, okay, 45, 55, you could probably tolerate that and things might be okay. Maybe even 65, above which you have problems. But sweet spot estrogen, no matter what, the ratio is with androgens. That's where you have morning wood most nights, nocturnal wood. Your libido is high, and erections for penetrative sex initiate, sustain. That's a critical element. Estrogen is wacky in one way or the other. You will not be able to sustain erections throughout the duration of sex. Good, strong, rigid erections for penetrative sex. Very strong primal visceral libido. That's the sweet spot. You go below it all, especially if you crash it, right? Libido it leaves your body. You will not know what libido is like. You can look at the most aggressively stimulating pornography and you will have 0.0% response to that pornography, which is crazy. But that is how bad crushing estrogen kills your libido. Same thing with erectile dysfunction. It will just not respond. The last point that I want to make is it can be tricky to find where your estrogen range is because, as I alluded to, when you are on low-end TRT doses, like 100 to 130 milligrams of testosterone a week, you really cannot tolerate much estradiol. Otherwise, you're going to have erectile dysfunction because there's too much estrogen for what ultimately is a moderate level of androgens. Once you get into the 160, 175, 180, 200, 210, 250 milligram of dose range per week of testosterone, you will be able to tolerate, you should be able to tolerate a little more estrogen, and that window becomes a little more relaxed where you can push 40, 45, 50, 55 max is where I would couch it. As long as those androgens are up there, some guys perform really, really well up there, and it's only in that state that they actually have great libido because they're able to sustain very high levels of androgens in the 1500 to 1700 or 1300 to 1500 nanograms per deciliter. Total testosterone, sky high free testosterone, lots of androgen receptor binding, lots of dopamine synthesis, so everything is supported. All right, look, as I alluded to earlier, my company, this channel, all we do is create products that are dedicated to dialing people in on TRT. As a coach doing this from a systems perspective, tracking every protocol like an engineer, I've learned a lot over the years to help people to dial in perfectly on TRT, and I created a bunch of products. Number one, Mastering Libido and Erections on TRT. It's a digital playbook, a downloadable guide for every ester to dial you in. Get it instantly down in the description of this video. If you need to dial in on Test Cream, I created the course that everybody should have as a rule book. It's a video course on dialing in Test Cream for libido and erections. down below. Testosterone cypionate, notoriously hard ester to dial in. Well, there's a strategy to it. I break down a decision tree, a full set of strategies in a video course to get the sexual function perfect on cypionate. You can get that down in the description of this video. Last thing, April, I've opened up, which is something we rarely do, an intake offer for coaching where all of the prices are reduced by nearly 50%. We're running the April intake TRT coaching window at reduced prices until 6 to 8 slots fill for each of the 3 programs, the single session consult, the 3-month one-on-one coaching program with me, and the 6-month one-on-one coaching program with me. Right now, there are 14 slots filled. We are moving until we have 25 slots filled completely, which means there are 11 slots open. There are only 11 slots open. When this closes, coaching will be down because I will be at max capacity. And the only thing you'll be able to book with me is a single session call or a consult. All right, so get on board. If you're looking to fix libido and erection issues, you've tried everything on TRT, just bring me on board, especially if you have the budget and you're serious about getting this fixed once and for all. This is what I do. I promise you we'll get it done. You can book me another minute down the description of this video at livecortex.com. All right, my brothers in test. It's been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you. Do me 2 favors. Number 1, like the video. It makes a huge difference. Please hit the like button. The like button, bro. Brother, hit the like button, bro. Sub to the channel. Listen, if any of this made sense to you, or if you're interested in deep dive breakdowns on the nuanced science of dialing in testosterone replacement therapy, that is what this channel is solely dedicated to. You're going to love being on board. Please subscribe. Otherwise, I did my own individual video on high estrogen versus low estrogen, some more detailed, meticulous signs on what to look for, and you should watch that next. Forget about what you're going to do for the next hour. Study it. Grab a beer, watch the whole video uninterrupted because you're going to learn a lot. All right, bro. Talk to you this week with more content. See you then.